I just picked up loads of new additions to the swarm. Find out all about them in this video. Hello everyone, welcome back to Spooderpods. I'm David and today I am doing a kind of unboxing introduction video. I picked up a huge load of new friends for the swarm and I wanted to share that with you, and also as usual integrate their introduction videos into this kind of unboxing, show you how I've set them up and so you can learn more about them. Now I ordered these from Graeme's Invertebrate Supplies, which is invertebrate.supplies.co.uk, not sponsored or in any way, but I was very pleased with the service and everything arrived quickly and without any issues. Plus there was good communication, so whenever I get good communication from a seller or a shop, I know generally it's going to be a better experience for me. So thank you very much, Graeme, for all of that. Now I've kind of nicknamed this video Beetlemania as well because there are a lot of beetles. I'm quite into beetles at the moment, but I did pick up some other species, and let's get straight into the introductions now so you can learn more about them. The first new addition was another ghost mantis, a Phylocrania paradoxa, and I have named him Boo 3. You may have guessed there's a theme in my naming. We had Boo, then Boo 2, now Boo 3. Sadly, I keep getting males and they don't last the longest amount of time, but they do have all lived their full lifespan, so I'm glad about that. But I really love ghost mantids. I think they're really cool, they're kind of cute, and they have a very interesting way of moving and behaving. I've yet to get a green one, but the one I got from Graeme is a lighter brown, so they may transition into that, or they may just stay lighter brown, but I'm happy with whatever. And ghost mantis, again, are a beautiful mantis species, and they're very easy if you're looking to dip your toes into mantids. I've got a guide, which I'll try and put a card for now, otherwise just have a quick search on the channel, because it doesn't always pop up. My favourite thing about them, I think, is the way they move, the sort of swaying motion they do to try and imitate leaves in the wind. And it's very interesting. So once again, I set up a slightly smaller enclosure because it is only a nymph, so it's not full grown, and I gave them the usual substrate with some springtails in there to keep it nice and clean. Lots of things to hang off on, organza, which I magnetised to the top of the enclosure because it's an acrylic enclosure, so if you do get an acrylic enclosure without a web mesh on top, make sure you give them something they can hang onto on top. And then an autumn theme as well, so sort of oranges, yellows, bowls, feeding bowls just in case. Things to hang off on like stairs, and lots of leaves, fake leaves, so they can hang off on them. I decided not to go bioactive with this enclosure, mostly because I think it's for my convenience, honestly. If I'm going to be really honest, I find mantids do a bit better and are a little bit easier to keep when I don't go bioactive. I love to go bioactive for my jumping spiders and other setups, but for my mantids I haven't experimented with that just yet. So far, Boo 3 settled in very well, been very active. I've made sure to mist him a couple of times just in case he's near a molt, and he's been eating fruit flies. I will try him on a hatchling locust soon, but for now I'm keeping the meals easy, frequent and small, just to give him the best chance of settling in very well. Next up is a Prosopcolia senegalesis. I made sure I got that in first so I didn't stumble on my words, and that is a Senegal stag beetle, and this is one of the new additions and part of the Beetlemania theme. And I was looking at these on Graeme's site and I thought they looked really cool and they had a very interesting appearance. Plus, for stag beetles, they looked like they were slightly easier to look after, so that made it a quite obvious choice for me, because with beetles, I really tend to keep stuff like blue death veinings, and I've got my obviously jewel beetle as well, so I want to sort of get more and slightly easier ones until I really get the husbandry down for all of them. Now, something I quite liked about Graeme's inverts is the fact that he sends the beetles, depending on their size obviously, in these lovely plastic tubs, like slightly better quality ones. And what I like is there's actually a little QR code with care info if you wanted to sort of look into it more, or you were unsure, or did it on a whim, or picked it up on a show. And I think that's quite a useful addition, and I quite like that. It's the first time I've seen it actually. A lot of sites provide info on their website, but not a direct link on the packaging, so that was really nice. Now I actually picked up a pair of these Senegal stag beetles because they were sold as a pair, and I thought it might be interesting to see if they actually bred, because apparently this species is slightly easier to breed if you get the situation right for them. So I went for a slightly larger tub than I have for my jewel beetle to give them lots of extra space, a lot of depth of substrate. I put some bark in there, orchid bark, which I did research was safe for them, to give them that rotting wood theme. I'm going to keep the humidity slightly higher in there as well and make sure that it gives them the ideal environment to breed. So there was lots of depth of substrate and a nice deep tub. I also went for a Reptitub again, the Reptitub large, whereas Bobo is in a medium, because again the large gives them lots of space. Now something that caught me slightly off guard, and I don't know why, I should have picked up on the research. These are a lot smaller than I thought they would be. They're almost like cute sized. They're kind of like that big, and I was expecting to be like huge because obviously stag beetle, that's the image you get. For me, that was both a disappointment and a really cool thing at once. I like cute, smaller inverts, but you just get this image of massive stag beetle. So that was my mistake, honestly. But because they're so cute and small, it makes them very interesting, quite easy to handle as well. They're very docile, they're quite willing to go on the hand and move around. Their carapace has this lovely shine, brown shine to it. And the male has this sort of lovely, sort of like compact pincers at the front of him. And it's very interesting. The female looks quite pretty as well, although obviously with the females, they don't have the massive impressive bits and pieces on them to do their courtship or their fighting behaviours to fight over the girls. But yeah, their appearance was very pleasing, and I probably will get them out to handle a little bit, although they have been quite shy so far, so I'm not going to be pushing my luck with them because I would like them to breed potentially. I've sort of already talked a bit about their enclosure, but in terms of other stuff I did some fake plants in there. I also added some more bark on top. I did some cork bark, so there's plenty of places to hide, leaf litter. I had 2 feeding bowls because I found from my parrot life that having multiple feeding stations is useful when you've got animals that are sharing the enclosure. I have 1 large jelly cup feeder and then a small bowl which I will put fruit or jelly depending on what I feel like giving them at the time. I will have guides on these guys once I'm pretty confident on their husbandry, but from what I read on Graeme's site, they seem pretty simple to look after as long as you maintain the humidity properly, give them the right environment in the first place and make sure they're actually fed. Now there's a kind of a theme with these beetles that the girls will be much more active. The girls are out a lot more than the boys. I have seen them, but they're straight to the jelly cups and enjoying themselves, but most of the time they're hidden. So if you were to get these guys, be prepared to only see them kind of when it gets darker or early in the morning, because they seem to be a bit more nocturnal or crepuscular. So they're not really an active species during the day, dependent on how hungry they are. And obviously you could set up their enclosure to encourage this, but I think that would be bad for their husbandry and bad for their welfare. Next up is a Prospercolius antelopes, and these are a West African stag beetle, and these are kind of nicknamed the antelope stag beetle. Again, quite small like the other previous species I mentioned, but very interesting and quite beautifully coloured with the shine on their carapace. A lot of the things I said about the previous pair, because it was a pair I got as well, because again I'm interested in maybe breeding them or seeing if they do breed, although if they don't, doesn't matter. But again, smaller than I expected, but no less pretty. The antlers, I'm thinking about antelope. The pincers and incisors at the front are small again, so it gives them that more compact look, which is quite interesting, with the females having only very tiny ones. But again, lovely shiny carapace, very deep browns, very interesting, and quite easy to handle again with no real complaints and no real issues there. Now Graeme did have a different species on his website at the time which had massive antlers at the front, and I thought, oh no, I'll go for these guys because they're a little bit different, but I kind of regret that now because both these species look quite similar. They have the same sort of like compact look at the front. The only big difference between them is the carapace and slightly a temperament. These guys are slightly more active a little bit earlier, so you can see them a bit earlier, but yeah, I a little bit of a buyer's remorse there. But I love all the little critters I bring into my house, and I will make sure they have the best husbandry possible. I set these guys up quite similarly to the other pair I got. Lots of depth of substrate, springtails, plants in there, a real plant in this one by the way as well as a couple of fake ones. The 2 feeding station bowls, larger and smaller, and also some moss in the corner and a decent amount of humidity. The previous pair I talked about need a little bit less humidity, these guys need a little bit more, so I added a bit of extra moss just so I can maintain it more effectively. Again, these guys are slightly more active than the others from what I've noticed, especially the girl. The girl's been out a lot eating and patrolling. You'd think it would be the boy, wouldn't you really? The boys are supposed to be the ones roaming around looking for mates, whatever, you know, girl power when it comes to beetles. And I've enjoyed observing them when I can, and I've tried to not disturb them too much while they're sort of in a settling in period. More beetles. If you're watching this and you love beetles, you'll be happy to see there's even more. It's a Prielophica coronata, I hope I pronounced that correct, and that's an urchin beetle. And this is something I bought on a bit of a whim. I was originally going to go for an Arabian darkling beetle, which is quite similar to my death faintings, but they look too similar, so I wanted to go for something different. And then once again, I was wrong-footed, because I looked at a lot of husbandry information online, and they were like, yep, you keep them in a similar sort of way to your blue death veinings, not too much humidity, make sure they've got a sandy environment because they're from Egypt and that sort of region, and give them the right sort of vegetables and dry food, protein foods. But I didn't say how big they were. These guys are much bigger, and I was like, wow, these are huge. They came in this tub, which I thought, again, nice high quality tub with information on there as well. And they're so much bigger. When you put them in your hand, they like, especially my partner Sophie's hands, they look so big. And I was like, wow, this is really impressive. So I got beetles that were smaller than I thought, and I got beetles that were much larger than I thought I'd get. But they're very interesting as a species, and according to their sort of like history, these were another species like the sacred scarab that the ancient Egyptians worshipped due to the whole rebirth theme and rising out of the sand theme, so they do like to burrow, and that really appealed to me. The more I looked into them, the more I was like, I'm really glad I got these guys. In terms of appearance, they're obviously bigger and they're very dark. They have a ridged carapace, and they also have spines on the edge of the carapace, which is quite interesting. Their heads are also quite pronounced and very active. You'll see them sort of like scanning with their little antenna and moving their heads around an awful lot. Very interesting species. I'm sorry I've said that quite a lot. I do find this sort of thing fascinating, especially with the history side of it. Originally I was going to put them in a smaller enclosure, like with my blue death veinings, and I thought, hang on, this is way too small. So I had to tip it out into, again, a larger repticrib, and give them a lot more depth because I know they're burrowers, some hides, cork bark and a coconut hide. I actually need to add more hides, I think, given how they're behaving, because I feel like they would benefit from that. And obviously some rocks and stuff as well. I may even upgrade them to a much bigger enclosure in the future, but for now they seem happy here. In terms of behaviour, very active at night. They're very noisy as well. They love clambering around. You'll hear them scattering around. So if you want to have them close to your bed or in your bedroom, maybe consider having them elsewhere, especially when they're rattling against a plastic tub or acrylic tub. But very cool, and they're very reactive. They will notice when you come and approach them. They will notice light changes. They will jump on food when they come onto it. They're very, very active, and that's really appealing to me. I'm really glad I decided to take a risk on these guys. They're also as well completely harmless. I know I had a message from a friend when I was talking about them saying, oh well, maybe they're one of these acid spitting types. I was like, no, they're completely harmless. The worst you could get is maybe like a slight irritating pinch if you really irritated them, but they don't seem to mind being handled either. And finally, apart from all the sort of extra supplies, I picked up a couple of small tubs and other bits, so thank you very much for sending those through. I picked up some more isopods. It's another one of the Armadillidium family, and they're the Croatian horned rhino isopods. I'm not quite sure where isopods get these dramatic names from, because when you look at them, they're like just isopods. But you know, I'll go with it. I love my panda kings, so I'll go with these guys. They're a sort of a traditional grey, purpley colour, maybe even hues of blue, but they're not very impressive looks-wise, colour-wise. But I had heard they're quite active, and they can be active during the day, and they have the very pronounced roll-up behaviour where they protect themselves, and they do it quite often, just even sometimes to move around. I don't know, it's just something they do. So I thought it'd be worth getting them, especially as they weren't quite very expensive. And I put them in one of my small sort of habitat tubs, which I put starter colonies in. They arrived in a nice little tub with moss, and there were a few extras, so again thank you Graeme for sending those through. And they've settled in very well. It's the standard isopod setup. You've seen it so many times on my channel. Decent depth of substrates and spring tails to keep it clean initially. A bit of cuttlefish bone, almost forgot that. Some moss to keep humidity regulated, and some places for them to hide. They've been loving it. They've been patrolling everywhere, rolling around in there, snacking on the fish flakes I gave them to initially give them a protein boost. And they're really on that cuttlefish. They really wanted that calcium extra, which is something really important to provide your isopods. So they settled in very well. I've enjoyed having them. Hopefully their colony will grow, because sadly I had some losses in colonies recently due to hot weather, and I think maybe due to a couple of mistakes with regards to the watering, because we had a heat wave of going up to 35. I was watering them once a day, which for my my other previous colonies, which for my panda kings was sufficient because they had a lot more substrate to absorb it. But for my other smaller colonies, there was a little bit less substrate, so once a day just wasn't enough. So it's a very harsh lesson learned, especially as they've bred, and one I'm hopefully not going to repeat, and maybe even have info of on the channel in the future. So there you have it. There's Beetlemania plus Boo3 and some isopods. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did enjoy it, please do like, subscribe and comment, because the channel needs it, because YouTube's quite a harsh environment right now. If you have any comments or questions, I'd love to hear from you. But in the meantime, take care and see you later.